And joining us now with more on the latest security situation across all of Israel's fronts is Alex Traiman, Jerusalem Bureau Chief at JNS. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lidar.
So lots to cover. Let's start with Gaza. The prospect of a hostage deal seems less and less likely ahead of Ramadan. So the question remains, why is Israel not advancing in Rafah, maybe exerting more pressure on Hamas?
Well, they're certainly operating in the southern Gaza Strip. They're operating very heavily in Khan Yunis. The international community is hoping to get and have a plan approved whereby Israel can move as many of the residents out of Rafah as possible before they go in with heavy fighting. I think that it will happen within the next coming weeks. There was the opportunity perhaps to get a hostage deal, which, as you mentioned, I think that is waning. I do expect that we'll see the attacks inside Rafah in the coming weeks. In the coming weeks.
And, you know, I want to move now to the northern front because a lot's been going on over the past 24 hours. The defense minister and other security officials warning that war with Hezbollah is fast approaching. We've been waiting for a diplomatic solution for some time now, but that doesn't seem to be advancing either. Now Hezbollah launched really a massive missile attack against Israel in the past 24 hours. So what's your analysis on this front?
Well, we've seen really since October 7th that Hezbollah and Israel have been slowly escalating the level of violence. It's hard to see how it can not continue to escalate in the coming days and weeks, but it is clear that both Israel and Lebanon both are trying to, while escalating on the one hand, trying to avoid that full-scale war. In the meantime, on the other hand, but both sides are really playing with fire over here, and we've said it for weeks and even for months, but it does seem as though there's no way to avoid a full-scale operation between these two.
And is Israel prepared for a multi-front war? And if so, also, you know, there's the question of how the international community will respond to such an event.
Well, Israel's been giving as much lip service as possible to the idea of a diplomatic solution, and that actually aids its efforts to gain the traction in the international community. If a diplomatic solution is not made, then Israel can say, look, we've been trying for weeks and months to reach a diplomatic solution, but you see that they continue to escalate their attacks, and they've left us no choice but to go in. At the same time, you mentioned an important component, which is that Israel does not want to fight a multi-front war. They believe that it is better to finish up the operations in Gaza because you have limited amounts of air power, you have limited numbers of tanks, you have limited number of soldiers, and if you're going to be fighting in the north, so which soldiers are you taking? Which tanks are you taking? They want to get everything out of the south first, and that's the reason why they're willing to pay lip service to the diplomatic solution because it gives them time to finish the operations in Gaza.
And now I want to look towards Ramadan. You know, Israel has decided, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has decided not to impose restrictions on worshippers at the Temple Mount. The decision tried to balance between sort of security considerations on the one hand and outrage should Israel impose security restrictions. So what does this essentially mean on the ground, and how much of a security risk does this now pose to Israel?
Well, it's a very big security risk. The Arabs and Hamas have said, you know, even from the beginning of this war, but for years back, they launched the war saying that this was the Al-Aqsa flood. That was the name of their operation. So they're talking about liberating the Temple Mount, and they could potentially be looking to utilize the Temple Mount, get as many Arabs and Hamas supporters as possible to the Temple Mount on Ramadan, which has unfortunately been a holy month for killing Jews historically here in the last several years in the state of Israel, and to use it as a launching point for a second October 7th attack. And Israel's been under a lot of pressure to demonstrate that it protects freedom of worship, but this is freedom of worship during a war. We saw in 2021 during the last flare-up that Hamas hung banners, billboards all over the Temple Mount, and they use it as the fulcrum for incitement against the Jewish people. It's a very, very fragile situation, and it could very well be that even though in the beginning they will allow the full amount of worshipers, that it might be a short amount of time over this month-long holiday whereby they reduce significantly the number of worshipers that are allowed up on the Mount.
Absolutely. I mean, we already saw a terrorist attack today in Jerusalem, and we know that that unfortunately Ramadan brings a lot of violence with it as well here in Israel. Alex Traiman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me.